My game revolves around a mechanic called experts. You hire them to get their bonuses, and those bonuses are supposed to combine to give you absurd levels of income. But I had a big problem because the experts in my first build were, to be honest, pretty boring. That's because I was playing it safe for the prototype, but that came back to bite me. See, I quietly put up a Steam page and a trailer back in December, and a publisher immediately reached out. They wanted to see a build, so I put together a vertical slice and sent it over. And then they got back and said it wasn't a good fit. That's like getting asked on a date and then getting dumped by them. Now, this could have been for a lot of different reasons. A lot of publishers only publish one kind of game, and I get the feeling they thought AAA Simulator was more of a straight tycoon game than it actually was. But I have a theory that if a game's fun enough, any publisher will think twice before rejecting it. Some games have a very simple core loop that you can prove is fun within seconds of picking up the controller. Other games, like mine, need a few more pieces to fall into place first. And I had a theory that most of those pieces for me were my experts in their abilities. So, I got back to work. Welcome to another devlog for AAA Simulator, the tycoon roguelike that's all about connections. Like a normal tycoon game, you hire and fire employees and make upgrades to your office. But unlike a normal tycoon game, you have to get enough profit to satisfy your shareholders or the run is over. That's where the roguelike half of the equation comes in. If you utilize your network of experts, you'll have no problem meeting your shareholders' exponentially growing expectations. Or, that's the theory at least. But when I made the first few experts, I started out with very basic abilities. I made a bunch of commons, in other words, and left the rare expert ideas for later. This is because I wanted to implement simple modifiers for each of the game's stats so I could test whether they worked or not. And that was a success, but it was also only a starting point. The main stats in the game are things like hype, daily sales, and labor output. These stats combine to calculate how much money you make every day, so pumping up those stats is how you meet your profit goals. So my first few experts did things like increase hype or daily sales or labor by small amounts, like 20%. And just that explanation itself is a little dull, so imagine what it's like to play. Before I showed my game to any other publishers, something needed to change. My first instinct was to start making abilities that sounded interesting to me. Like Bobby, who you can fire to nullify your quarterly goal and pass the quarter automatically. But approaching it this way doesn't really create multifaceted strategies. It's true that Bobby can be used strategically, but what experts does he synergize with? In most roguelikes, going for specific builds is what drives your decisions. You might choose a magic caster build, or a tank, or focus on DPS. Like in Hades, you can go all in on dash damage, or you can try to build yourself up and be as resilient as possible. In games like Balatro, these builds get a little more abstract, but they're still there. You could focus on pumping up hearts as much as possible, or you can make a tarot card production engine, or literally infinity other things. So I decided to start by focusing on some specific builds. The first of which was a build that min-maxed labor. Since AAA Simulator is about running a game studio, labor is what determines how much work the employees do each day. When enough work has been done, your next game releases, and depending on the score, you get a boost to hype and therefore sales. So the more games you release, the more money you make. With this strategy in mind, I started making experts that would make labor cheaper and boost employee production. I already had some consumables that could boost labor output and make employees work for free. So I made Star Recruiter, which is an expert that makes it so these enhancements are automatically applied to 1 in 20 new hires. I also made Legendary Coder, who gives a labor buff to every employee in the coding department. At this point, I wanted to add in some synergies with the theme of making labor cheap but effective. And what better way than to incentivize the player for firing people? I added an AI artist, which produces the work of 1 employee for every artist you fire, permanently. Along with headhunting consultant, who reduces salaries by 20%, labor could start to become extremely cheap if you play your cards right. These were great additions to my experts, but when I tested the game, it was still hard to bridge the gap to these synergies. In roguelikes, you can aim for a certain build, but that doesn't mean you're going to get it. You need options to fill in the gaps when you're waiting for that last piece of the puzzle to fall into place. These could be abilities that are just good on their own, or ones that are good for a certain stage of the game. Like Auteur, which was the very first expert I created, but I decided to change his ability. Now he gives a big multiplier to hype if he's the only expert you've hired, but he gets weaker with every new expert you hire. Another one of these early game experts that get worse as you go on is Big Fan, which doubles hype, but that modifier reduces every time you fire someone. There are also some experts I added that will be good with multiple builds, like Restructuring Officer, who gives you cash for firing enhanced employees, or Efficiency Consultant, who makes it free to fire employees. Those two could easily synergize with each other or with the labor min-max build I started with. By the time I was done, I had 25 solid experts to show off my concept. is still nowhere enough for a full game, but I figure 50 will be good for the demo and at least 100 for the final release. That plus a lot more consumables and studio upgrades. By the time I was done, I had a rapidly growing cast of characters, which in turn lent a lot of, well, character to the game. Making up all their names and descriptions has also been a really fun narrative design job. I feel like they, more than the game's events, really drive the satire home. And, most importantly, I'm ready to send out pitches to more publishers. That's it for now. I just wanted to show you my experts and see what you think. Go wishlist AAA Simulator on Steam. Link in the description. Thanks for watching.